Today we're talking about mom guilt. So, do moms in the Philippines experience mom guilt in the same way that moms here in the West, specifically in America, experience mom guilt? So, today I'm going to be talking about mom guilt. What is it? Differences in mothering in the Philippines versus in the West, or in general, just America, and why mothering with guilt has potential harm. So, what is mom guilt? We often hear this. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I don't often hear that. I only really have heard of that constantly. Not that now, because of social media, no one uses that in the Philippines. I think that would be something to expect that they would use that language because whatever we see in the media here in the US permeates over there in the motherland. So obviously, we now know what that means, which is feeling bad, like feeling like you missing out, you're missing out as a mother, you're not providing what you think should be provided to your child, and it causes this feeling of guilt. So let's talk about the feeling of guilt. Guilt is you feel guilty when there is a set norm, a culture, if you will, and you're not meeting the standard. And so now you feel bad, you feel guilty in comparison to others, specifically to other moms. So that's very important to point out that guilt is just, you won't feel guilty if there is no norm, but there is something that is the standard. And so you feel that you're below the standard. And if this is something important to you, mothering, I would imagine that for most mothers, if not all, then if this is important to you and you feel like you're not meeting that standard, you will feel bad. So that is mother guilt. Let's talk about differences, okay, in different cultures. And again, as you know, in this channel, I always say that culture evolves. So whatever we're talking about here could change in a decade or more or less. So our job is to be a student of the culture as I am. So first, in a more collective society in general, we have cooperative breeding, meaning other people are helping out, raising your child. We often hear that here in America that raising a child takes a village. And there is something different there because even when we say village, part of really building a village is trusting the next person. So, in a more individualistic culture, it's not that you don't trust the other, but you are more in your space and hanging out less with other people. So you just don't build that trust stamina as compared with the groups of people that are constantly hanging out. They are sensing each other, getting to know each other. They get to know their worldview, each other's worldview, their perspectives in life. So that builds trust. So one difference is that we have more trust, therefore there's more cooperative breeding. I mean, if I just traveled in back home and I stayed there for almost 2 months, it is like if I have a friend, a barkada, and even though I know my friend, we grew up together. So if I were in the mall and they said, "Oh, let's split up," I am very trusting that even though maybe that's only the second time that my child has met my childhood friend, that they just go. Or it doesn't happen in the Western culture, more in the West, like Canada, those that have more similar cultures, but it takes so much more. Cooperative breeding, the essence of that is trust, and also that you see other people as almost like surrogate mothers. Which brings me to the second point. We have a very different definition of mothers. Mothers, as a therapist, I'm very aware of the attachment fury. You might not be, but it's basically a study of how we're attached to our caregivers. Mostly the study has been on mothers, but there's been an expansion. And that potentially when mothers are not attuned to their child, that they could be disorganized or anxious. So there's different levels. Um, I'm not going to get into it, but basically the focus very much is the mother. And in a cultural perspective, the mother is it. And of course, nothing beats the mother's love. I think across culture, we understand this. We carry our babies. I'm a mother myself. But there is a trust on the other, like surrogate mothers. Even like for in the Philippines, families that may have money to pay a yaya, a babysitter, or a nanny, they do trust them to be with their babies. I know that there's a trend that it's harder to trust other people, but it's still there. So the definition of mother is very extended compared to a more individualistic culture where the mother is it. Even when they ask support from another person, there is this guilt because the asking of in the West is to try to really balance everything, life and work. You know, sometimes mothers have to go to work so much sooner, and they don't have help. The help that they have is not so much based on choosing. Like it's not like always an auntie, which they may have, but that's I'm talking about in general. But like a daycare in which they don't choose, but basically that's what's available, which makes a big difference in the culture, in the Philippine culture. Now, there's also a difference. You might think, oh, well, some well off moms leave their children with their yaya. I think there's really a stark difference when we leave children in the home where we make the rules, when the child sort of understand that the parent is still the boss, rather than when the child is left in a place where you have to abide or adhere to the rules there. Now, this is not to really shame mothers who do that because not everybody is able to do that, which makes the point why, you know, in the West, there's more mom guilt because of the system of care that's set up. Now, if when the system of care, it becomes the way it is, it becomes the culture. So now it's almost like the chicken or the egg. But I want to believe most mothers, if given the opportunity, would want to spend more time with their children. So I think I've mentioned three. One more thing I'll mention before I talk about how parenting with guilt could potentially bring harm to children. So the last one is a social media. Again, I've mentioned that everything permeates because especially Filipinos love Facebook, Instagram, and the feminist movement in the West, if we know the history versus in the Philippines specifically, very different. You know, in the West, I feel like the women were more oppressed historically. Not that women in the Philippines never experienced that, but there's more, women are more revered. Even pre-colonial time, women could have a high position. They could hold high position. They are healers. So there's a different feminist perspective compared to the West and then the Philippines. Next time we could talk more about that. But the mom guilt in the Philippines is more because of economic reasons. Many of our moms have to travel in the diaspora, OFW, and that is very hard for the Filipino mom. That can cause the mom guilt to Filipino families, specifically to Filipino moms who are OFW. So maybe we'll talk more about that. But returning back, why mom guilt can potentially bring harm to your child is because when you're parenting with guilt, imagine what you would do if you feel guilty. You probably would not delay your child's gratification, like just give in. And that results in the child not able to self regulate. What does self regulate mean? The child can calm down their bodies, which is very important. So, you know, we have a lot of addiction in the Philippines. So, is it that we are parenting also with guilt? Even though my thesis in this video is that we use that more in the West, but of course it exists, that we just give in. We feel bad, we compensate. So another one is that we don't allow natural consequences to occur. We fix things for our children. We're too quick to give a solution. Okay, so that potentially can cause harm because children could not really discover their fullest potential. Another one is we raise children that are very fragile because, again, if something's thrown at them, we want to catch everything because we feel bad, we feel guilty. And, in the work of Jonathan Hine in his research, children that are fragile, one thing, they are have a hard time self-regulating. They're easily impacted by the things that are happening, the stressors, um, feels magnified to them. So imagine if you're raising your child in that way, in which one thing we cannot really prevent is that we will have some stressors in life. So we want to prepare the child for the road, not prepare the road for the child. Okay. Another one, a couple of things is that they would miss their childhood. Childhood is about not just having fun. And I think this is what we notice a lot in the West, but I start observing this also in the Philippines, is that we want our children to have fun. Like if they're bored, like we can't stand it. Boredom, being bored is the sister or the brother of creativity. So if you're a parent, let that just sit with you. Allow your children so they could really innovate. So when we are parenting with guilt, we want to make sure we fill their empty spaces, if you will. We want them to be entertained, to always have fun. But life is not always fun. So they're going to miss their childhood. And lastly, we see adults, and it's almost like they have not lived as children. And that's one harmful effect, that adults are have the bodies of an adult. They now have holding position, but they're like children, and they have missed their childhood, which piggybacks on my last thought. So if you're a mother, for whatever reason that you feel guilty, whether it's generational, whether it's culture, and you need support, I help Filipino moms, Filipino women to really rewrite their story. Not just with the culture that you hear, but actually creating your own culture, rewriting your story, and setting yourself free. So if that's interesting to you, just visit the consult link below. Thank you for listening. I hope I serve you well. This is Roanne Samuels, licensed psychotherapist in California. Bye now.